You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Jonesy and alongside me is the lovely Lauren, and this is the Waystation. This is our news and rumor show. Today is August 6th. It's a Sunday. Lauren, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. We've got some interesting news tonight, to say the least.
Yeah, we really do. A lot of Ahsoka stuff. The media train is the steam is flowing. We are in full motion, straight ahead. We're powering through for the next 2.5 weeks or so as of this point. So it's kind of fun. This is when the fun begins, right? This is when things start to get really exciting. So before we do that, though, want to welcome back Whit. One of our former Patreon members is back on Patreon. So Whit, is really great to see you back as part of the tribe again. And speaking of part of the tribe, special thank you to our now part of the tribe members, Rob, Mike, Ms. Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, Steve, and Rita Reborn. And then our Delusions of Grandeur members, Rod, CJ, and Alex. If you're curious about Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon. We would love to have you join the crew. We have a lot of great content out there, a lot of great things that you only get on Patreon, both video and audio. So no matter what your speed, we have something for you. If you're listening to this on the podcast, thanks for the download. But if you would like to come join us on the live stream, we do a live recording of our shows on Sundays and Thursdays on cantinacast.com/YouTube. We would love if you stop by, if you'd like to like and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you come back and join all of our amazing people in the live stream. And Lauren, who are those wonderful people this evening?
So tonight we have Steph, Alexandra, Sky, Music Train, Cube Dude, Jack, Alex, and Gary. So welcome, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, everyone. We certainly appreciate it. This coming Thursday, we will be back on our more normal schedule with a couple of shows a week, we think. Albert comes back into town. And we're resuming our Ready for Ahsoka series. So this is when stuff is starting to get really, really good. We've had some great episodes. Thanks for everyone who's checked those out in the past. But we are doing A World Between Worlds this coming Thursday. So we're starting to get to the really good stuff. We think the stuff that you really need to know, you really need to pay attention to, get up to speed, especially if you haven't watched Rebels in a while. We think it's really important for you to check that out. So, Lauren, are you excited to talk A World Between Worlds or listen to A World Between Worlds? I'm not sure if are you joining us on that show?
No, I'm not. I'm not for Thursday, but that will be a good one to catch up on because there is a lot there, and I suspect that the World Between Worlds is going to be important for the Ahsoka series. So
there are a lot of rumors circulating, and we'll talk about one tonight as well. It's bordering on spoilers, so we will keep it pretty high level. But when we get to the Ahsoka content, we have a couple of things we're going to kind of get out of the way right up front at the start of the show before we really dive into the Ahsoka content tonight. So the first one is going to be Young Jedi Adventures. This is the Disney Junior type of TV series that's focusing on the High Republic Jedi. We have 7 new episodes that are available now. They're over on Disney Plus. They're also on Disney Junior, I believe. So go check those out. These have actually been really good. Have you watched any of the Young Jedi Adventures content or any of the new ones yet?
I have to get caught up because Nubs is so adorable that, I mean,
everyone's in love with Nubs.
That's the reason to watch it, honestly. So, yeah.
I like some of the other characters. I like the mechanic character. Like she's just so cool. I'm terrible with names, so I can't remember all the names off the top of my head, but it's a great, like the whole cast, it's like a great ensemble they've got there, and they really do. This is one of the things that Disney does just really well. Their Disney Junior content has always been super exciting, whether it was Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, or exciting is probably the wrong word, but just things are just really well done. And even as an adult sitting there with your kid watching it, it's just really entertaining, right? I mean, I've been a huge fan of like Phineas and Ferb forever. And so
yeah,
like shows like that, I just can't get enough of.
That's definitely one of those ones that everyone can enjoy. And yeah, it's like you said, I feel like Disney can be good at striking that balance to where like the kids watching it, but it's also not like boring for the parent watching it either.
Right. Exactly. And especially it's a great introduction for people with the High Republic as well, because it's an era that You get a little bit of Yoda, so there's characters that you know and are somewhat familiar with, but it's also a different era and get people interested in that. And especially with the High Republic books, you have your middle grade, your young adult, and then your adult novels. So you really do have the whole gamut covered, as well as comic books and other, short form material for High Republic. So it's a really good entry point into it for really young viewers, but also anybody that might be interested in checking out a book at some point. There's a lot of great content they can go step right into from that. If they're on the older age of that spectrum with other family members watching it, but they're kind of interested, another way to get other people interested, which I think is really cool. All right. So let's talk a little bit of a rumor that's been debunked. So this is Mandalorian season 4. And there was a rumor going around that they were entertaining the idea, or maybe even doing it. It kind of depends on who you talk to. Basically taking season 4 and making it into a movie rather than a season. Now, this has been debunked, and it says it's not going to happen. But I thought it would be interesting just to talk about it a little bit, of saying, what if something like this did happen? When you take a series and you make it into a movie, I mean, unfortunately, I think you get less content as a result of that. But is that something that you would even, I mean, how does that make you feel? Like when you think about taking a show you've been consuming on Disney Plus, like Mandalorian, that's several chapters long, but then condensing that into one story, and that be the only thing you have in order just to get it on screen, on the big screen rather.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to consider the possibilities of this because I mean, personally, if they replaced season 4 with a movie, it would feel strange to me because we're used to a more like longer format storytelling with The Mandalorian. And on the other hand, to me, like that last episode of season 3 kind of felt like a series ending to me. Like it did have me questioning, like, is there going to be another season of Mandalorian, or was that it? Because they kind of put a nice little bow on everything.
Right.
So it's interesting to think about, first of all, like, what would season 4 even look like? And second of all, I feel like if you take a show and squish it into a movie, you're cutting out a lot of stuff that people are used to seeing. So I could see that not really working for some people.
Right. And Jeff in the chat's got a comment here. I kind of think season 4 as a movie would work, especially since season 4 could be essentially anything with the way that season 3 ended, much to your point of saying that really the entire arc that we had followed with The Mandalorian through the first 3 seasons, very much done, very much closed. It feels complete. So you can do whatever you want from here if you want to change if you do want to change that format and you do want to make it into more of a big screen production. I think where this almost makes a little bit of sense, and maybe where the rumor gets started, is that Star Wars has struggled to get anything on the big screen for a while now. And so why not take arguably your most popular property right now, your biggest piece of what drives viewership, and put that on the big screen. Now, I think maybe to where some of your points were going to is that I like the serial nature of the show, that you can bounce kind of back and forth. You don't have to necessarily tell one story. You could tell several. You can tell 2 or 3 kind of arcs within this chapter setup of 8 chapters in a season. You don't necessarily have to be bound by one start and finish for a movie. And I like that flexibility that it gives us. It gives us those times to be able to go out on an adventure of maybe an episode or 2 and not have to get bogged down in keeping the overall narrative going. And we can use those as kind of not filler in the narrative, but also just interesting things. And where else would you get an X-Files type of show, or a buddy cop type of episode?
Or a giant spider episode.
Yes. I mean, yes. I know some people are really creeped out about that one.
Yeah,
but
I don't know if I liked that episode, but I also can't picture Mandalorian without that episode. So, I mean, whatever that means.
Right. I mean, I'm on board with it, actually. I love that episode. I just thought it was a great episode. I mean, it was just so well done. And like, man,
it was well done. It was just hard to watch. It was very gross.
It creeps a lot of people out. I get that. But also
but
just
I did
the way.
love Frog Lady, so.
Oh, well, there. All right.
In a movie, you don't have time for Frog Lady, and that's a shame.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. Like the little scenes of Grogu, slurping the eggs, or how much of a jerk the New Republic, are with them helping out the Mando, but then not helping him out. I mean, those types of things. Where else would you get those types of episodes if you put them in a movie. It just feels like something totally different. So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of great comments in the chat, of course, and I'm struggling to keep up with all of it tonight, so I apologize about that. But I think this is something that could work, but I'm happy for them to continue this in the format that they are because I like waiting that extra week. I think it's really nice pacing of content. I think it really does give us a better appreciation for the different parts of the story that we could explore that might come in later on in a different season as well. That Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau have been really good at doing. So I really appreciate the opportunities that they give us when they draw this out a little bit like that.
I also feel like there's something to be said too for, maybe there's a reason why Star Wars TV shows are working for a lot of people better than Star Wars films right now. And maybe that's something that we should continue to cater to. Because, I mean, different types of storytelling are going to work for different stories. And so if TV is what's better for a show like Mandalorian, then just, don't fix it if it ain't broke type of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I mean, when we've talked about Bob Iger's comments about making content, like how much they want to spend on content, and then how much content they actually want to make, right? Maybe spreading it out a little bit more, being more deliberate with what they want to do. And this is an area where one thing that comes up within the context of that conversation is that they have bred behaviors now of audiences expecting to watch them on streaming rather than go to the movies. And that is costing them on the bottom line. It's costing them from what they feel an experience type of thing is. There's a whole lot of things that go behind a lot of this stuff. And we won't get into the strike aspect of it, but those comments are very synonymous, I think, with this conversation. And it's a reason why they might be, you could entertain taking something from Disney Plus that does well, that you feel comfortable with, and then translating it to the big screen and doing something with it there. Especially with Dave Filoni, you want him to make a movie at some point anyway that is supposedly going to merge a lot of these properties from the D Plus series into an event. And so bringing some of that in order to make the movie special again and know that you're not going to get it on Disney Plus for some time, 6 months or whatever it might be, to try to retrain behaviors. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about that one, but how would you feel about that?
I don't want my behavior to be retrained. I like it the way. No, I did. I mean, I used to love going to the movies. Like, I used to be a big going to the movie person. If I loved a movie, I would see it multiple times. But I mean, these days, I don't go to the movies nearly as much as I used to because the whole experience of going to the movies has changed, whether we like it or not. It feels a little bit different now, at least for me. And so, because of that, I enjoy like having the option to just watch something in the comfort of my own home. Now, if I ever get to a point where I enjoy the movies again, then that's awesome because I did used to really like that. But I mean, for the time being, I think there's a reason why people are wanting to watch things at home. And so I don't know, retraining behavior is just kind of, that seems like it's going to be difficult to do because there's a reason why people like what they like to a certain extent. And also, like, maybe they would do better if people could watch it at home. So it's kind
Maybe
of a
so.
mixed bag. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things of where do you want to compete with movie theaters with your in-home entertainment? Because I mean, remember during the pandemic, they would also release some movies straight to Disney Plus, like Mulan, which of course created a huge uproar and a huge stir and all of that. So I don't know. I mean, Albert and I talked about this when we did our Indiana Jones Patreon show a few weeks back after that, and our theater going experiences were a little bit different, right? The days of when you go see Star Wars and everybody's dressed up and you have white lightsabers waving around and you have cheering in the crowd, you just have this energy about it, is so mixed these days, which is really disappointing in a lot of ways. Like I want to recapture. I mean, that's me recapturing my 20s, right, or something like that, or even the sequel trilogies had that to an extent, especially like Force Awakens. I remember being very clear that that energy was still there.
Yeah.
But having that energy back in the theater, giving you the reason, like this is why I go. You go because you want to experience it, not only in that cinematic environment, but let's be honest, there's a component about, while not everybody was a huge fan of people, there is something about seeing it with a group of enthusiastic people who are all enjoying it for the same reasons. That there's something special about that.
If everybody's having a wonderful time and being nice and wholesome and enjoying Star Wars, then that's great. Yeah, I love to see that. So I agree with you on that point.
Yeah, when we're getting some comments about my comments about retraining behavior. I mean, that sounds very utilitarian. Maybe it's a little THX 1138 going here. But I
I
mean,
mean, it's
but
kind of
realistically, it's what they're
you were onto something though. I do think that that is kind of the way that they think about it. So
they
I like
cult
what
they
Alex said.
cultivated the behavior, right? So
Yeah, exactly. I like what Alex said about I just realized over the last couple years how gross people are. That's me. That's my issue. Yeah, that's
right.
exactly my issue. So thank you for verbalizing that for me.
And you know what's funny about the movie going experience? We'll move on here in just a moment, but you know they invested a lot of money into these really nice seats, the recliners. Some of them have heated seats now, which is really nice if you live somewhere that doesn't have heat outside and everywhere else for you. But you know you have these really upscale, these upgraded environments. But I don't know about you, but my last few times in the movie theaters, those seats are showing their age. They're not wearing real well. They don't always take care of them very well. So even that aspect of the experience, aside from a couple of theaters that I probably prefer to go to, they don't really take care of their stuff very well. So even that part of the environment is inconsistent of what you would expect when you go into a theater, especially with how much these things cost these days, especially if you're trying to take your family. Like you can't get out of this for $100 anymore, right? So for bigger families, I know Albert trying to take his is really difficult because they
Yeah.
love going to the movies, but when you have 30,000 children with you, you can't do it, right? It's just really tough to do it often enough, right?
And with assigned seating, that kind of, I feel like now assigned seating is more common than non-assigned seating, at least where I am, and
I will
that is
not
another
go back
issue.
to the dark ages of no assigned seats. I draw the line at no assigned seats.
Well, maybe
I
it's because
I
I
love
wait
assigned
until the
seats.
last minute, and then the seat that I want, I can't get, and then I'm like, okay, well, this sucks. So
That seems more like a Lauren problem. Yeah.
I can't be the only one having that problem, though.
Well, I mean, the spontaneity, I guess, of it, I guess from that respect, I think you're right. I just want to go to the movies, but then I got to make sure, but do I get the seat I want? Okay, well, now I can't do the 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. show. Now I can only do the 10 p.m. show. So
Yeah.
I can understand where I ran into that. I was going to go watch Mission Impossible because over at the Cinemark here, they do $5 Tuesdays, which is fantastic, right? $5 on Tuesdays. Who wouldn't go do that? But the only show I could go see was like 10 o'clock at night because everyone else was trying to go.
Mm,
And I just couldn't
yeah.
swing that because unless I'm doing the Cantina Cast, I don't stay up that late. So
Yeah.
anyway, okay. Well, good conversation there, but let's
Now
move
that we
on.
got that complaining out of the way.
Yeah, now we got that out of the way. We're only going to spend 5 minutes on this and 17 and a half later here. Let's get into some Ahsoka. So again, the media blitz is underway, and this is what we expect, right? We start getting beneath that 4 week mark, that under the month mark. And it was pretty much right on the button when we hit 3 weeks, man. Things have started to really come out, and they're not quite all the time quite yet, but we did have a lot that came out this week. So we do want to go through some of this. But in kind of the first piece of news, though, is that we do have a confirmed, there's I would call it a rumor or a leak, but the 2 episode premiere runtime is reported to be an hour and 36 minutes total. So for both episodes total, hour and 36 minutes. So this is, roughly, even with credits and everything, we're talking 40-ish minute episodes. So how does that feel to you? Does that feel better than a 30, or do you feel like this is about right, this 40 to 45 minute per show range?
I feel like that time frame, I mean, that's usually the time frame that I would expect with non-Star Wars TV shows. So that's a time frame that I'm happy with and comfortable with because I feel like it's like enough time to show what you need to show without rushing it. Like you can take a little bit of time to like get the pacing right. You're not trying to cram a bunch into 30 minutes. And it's also, I mean, I could see it being maybe a little bit long for some people because those first 2 episodes are going to be an hour and a half. That's like almost watching a movie. But I would rather have enough time to tell the story rather than rushing it. To me, rushing it is always worse. So I'm
Right.
good
And
with
when
it.
Right. And when you think about this from a network TV perspective, an hour-long show is usually about a 42-minute episode, I believe.
Yeah.
18 minutes of all that is all the commercials and other crap in between. So this is much more in line with 2 1-hour episodes on network TV, which I think I've read some articles out there that were kind of waxing on this, of saying that Star Wars has finally learned its lesson, right? With shorter episodes. Some of the content with Mandalorian, it's quite honestly, it's kind of all over the place. The time, you never know what the actual timing is going to be. Some are really short, and then some are a bit longer. But then you've also got some other content like Obi-Wan Kenobi, again, that suffers the same thing. And some criticism out there, and I think we've probably had this a couple of times, maybe not a lot, but sometimes you want that episode to be able to breathe a little bit more than you have that time when you cram everything into a half hour. Maybe it's just so packed. You just have this one story, or you start bolting little things on the ends of it just to make it. I think Mandalorian, we had one episode that was like that, where they just kind of leapt off on one point, and then restarted at the very end, and everything in between didn't make any sense compared to what we started and ended with.
Right. Yeah.
But again, I think to allow each of these the time it takes to develop it, especially these first couple, which are really important to reestablish for maybe viewers who haven't watched some of the content like Rebels and stuff in a while, to reintroduce them to these characters, but also for new viewers that don't have as much history with these characters as we do, or maybe it's not as well versed as some of us. You have that time to bring them on board, and you start to sprinkle things in rather than just having to hit them repeatedly hard a couple of times to say here's who they are, and remember it or jump off the ship, right? So I think these are important to be able to let that writing really take root and let the story kind of naturally evolve. So I think this timing is actually really good.
I also wonder if at the beginning of the episode, if there's going to be some sort of like a quick recap, kind of like how there was at the beginning of Kenobi. And if they tried to do something like that and it was any shorter than 42 minutes, I could see that feeling very, very tight. So yeah, I agree with you about give it room to breathe. Give it time to actually like finish out scenes correctly. Don't leave anything hanging. So yeah, I think it sounds good.
It's really interesting to consider a kind of like a prologue and a catch up type of montage, or here's what you missed. Like previously in Rebels, I don't know how they would quite do that without using live action. That would be really interesting to see how they would go about catching up, unless you focus more on Ahsoka and what Ahsoka had done in Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. So that might be kind of interesting, depending on how much bases those. I mean, the Jedi episode, of course, would have a lot of relevance here, of course. But I'm really curious to see what they might do with that. And again, we've talked about this before, speculation wise, of whether or not they'll kind of fill in, like during the Rebels epilogue, do you fill in some of those gaps, right? Because that epilogue fast forward and jumped a fairly substantial amount of time that cuts right through all of this too, right? So having that time to be able to explore some of that and use that for the Ahsoka epilogue, if you will, or this Ahsoka first episode, second episode. But this idea of flashbacks is starting to kind of creep in more and more, especially when you figure in like how are they going to work in an Anakin in the series, and so you're going to have some of that. So I'm wondering if it's going to, how easy is it going to be to keep track of where we're at in the timeline with some of this as well?
Yeah, I feel like flashbacks from Ahsoka's perspective, I think they're gonna have to lean on those to a certain extent, because some of this, there's a lot to cover, and some of it I don't see how it could be covered with just like characters having a conversation about it. So I expect we'll see a lot of flashbacks.
So speaking of flashbacks, we did get a new TV spot or trailer. Now I'm going to equate this more as a Disney Plus TV spot, but it's all framed up within Ahsoka, and it plugs Ahsoka at the very end. And this is the Masters and Apprentices TV spot. We'll have all the links for this in the show notes, of course, on both YouTube and on the podcast. So you'll be able to click all these and find them if you're not familiar with it. But the Masters and Apprentices TV spot basically goes through all of Star Wars, and it's a commercial, right? So I mean, it's a TV spot, so it's nothing deep dive or anything like that. You get different bouts of it. You get the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. You get some of the teaser footage and trailer footage from Ahsoka, of course. There's a lot of that, especially towards the end of it. Stuff from the original trilogy, sequel trilogy, prequel trilogy, all sorts of stuff just throughout it, talking about Masters and Apprentices, and then wrapping up with Ahsoka and Sabine with some of these lines as well. Although Hera's in there, I think, too. But do you think they're leaning in really hard? I mean, if they're leaning in this hard, maybe I'll reframe the question. If they're leaning this hard on the Ahsoka Sabine thing, do you feel like this is almost like guaranteeing this is a red herring, or do you feel like, no, they're really telling you exactly what it is? There is a master-apprentice relationship and more of the formal Jedi type of training? Or do you feel like, no, this is just kind of a red herring of, yeah, master-apprentice, but really in a totally different way?
I think it could be a master and apprentice relationship, but not in a traditional way, because I am still not convinced that Sabine is force sensitive. And I know that there's people that disagree with me on that, and I could be proven wrong. But at this moment, I am not convinced. So maybe they are like a master and apprentice sort of relationship in a little bit of a different way. Maybe instead of being like a Jedi way, maybe in more of just like a spiritual teacher kind of way. So I think that's entirely possible, and maybe the angle's going to be like there's different types of master and apprentice relationships. It doesn't have to always be like the traditional type. I could see that being the case. Part of the vibe I got as well is like I almost wonder if somebody came up with this idea of like, wouldn't it be cool if we like made a video of like all the master and apprentice relationships, and then they're like, how do we make that about Ahsoka? And
Right.
then they just tried to combine the two because it was a really cool video. And then at the end, I was kind of like, huh, I wonder how that's gonna connect. I don't know at this point.
The more I think about this, I actually really like that. I think that's funny. I think the more I think about this, though, I'm almost like, man, Sabine, the way that she says master is almost just like an honorary child, like, spitting something back, master. Like there
Mhm.
wasn't really, she wanted her to train her as more of a master, but then never did. But Sabine just eggs her on and calls her master because it bothers Ahsoka so much. I,
Yeah.
I don't know how true that would end up being, but I just like the idea because Sabine does have that, she has that rebellious nature to her, that rebellious streak. She doesn't like being told what to do. I mean, none of these characters really like being told what to do, but Sabine in particular, she always acts out a little bit more and is a little more, impetuous. And is that the right word? Impetuous? All right.
Something
This is
like
why,
that.
that's why you don't use big words on air. Yeah. But you take those moments, you just kind of push back without any kind of real reason to, just to be defiant. And so I'm wondering if it's something more along those lines of they spent so much time together. Yeah, they were almost like master and apprentice, and maybe they kind of flirted with the idea a little bit. But Sabine still kind of chides Ahsoka for not taking a more formal mentorship role that maybe Sabine would have preferred, especially with training with the lightsaber and some other activities.
I could see that because in that scene, it even aside from that comment, the just the way that they're interacting with each other does feel a little bit tense. So I kind of had a similar interpretation of she was kind of just kind of poking at her with the way she was saying it.
Yeah, I think so. So another interesting part of this one was we do get, I don't know if it was if it was new dialogue or it's just, anytime we hear Baylan Skoll, when we hear Ray Stevenson talk, it just sticks out so much because I think he's going to be really, his loss is going to be really felt in the series because I have such high hopes for this character, and
Me
quite
too.
honestly, he's amazing and amazing actor regardless. And so I think it's going to be a huge, we're going to feel this loss. I know the three of us have talked about this, several times over the last few months. But of course, one of the lines in this trailer was, one must destroy in order to create. And the more I thought about that, I mean, it's a very, I mean, this type of line goes all the way back to Bane in the Bane trilogy of books as well. He talks a lot about this, but I don't think this is from like a dark side, resurrection of the Sith perspective. The more I thought about it, I'm like, what would motivate them, especially with some of the things that we've heard? And we've heard from them at Celebration and some other interviews that we have to, they're a product of some of the things that have happened to them. They're not necessarily bad people. They're not necessarily trying to resurrect, evil. They don't embody evil or anything like that. And so when I think about that kind of line, I'm just continue to be curious about what is it that that they're okay with destroying in order to create or to bring back, I think. And when I think about a world between worlds, it's not always about creating something. It's about, and you could be creating, the legacy of the empire and things like that. Maybe that structure, that order, maybe that is something they want. But when you factor a world between worlds, it could be something that they've lost and something they want to bring back to them. But it is going to take significant sacrifice and destruction in order for that to happen. Does that seem plausible to you, or does that seem reasonable, or something you might enjoy, or am I just being totally crazy?
No, I 100% agree because when I'm thinking about Ray Stevenson's comments during Celebration, when he was asked, like, what was your inspiration for your character? And he was very limited on what he could say, but he was talking about like Quest, he was talking about the Knights of the Round Table and like King Arthur mythology. And that totally to me seems in line with we've got to accomplish something here and it might be ugly the way that we have to accomplish it. And so I've just ever since he said that, I have been so interested and fascinated with this character because that's just like speaking my language. And I feel like the destroying in order to create that, yeah, I agree with you that that's not necessarily an evil thing. Sometimes it's just a tough sacrifice that has to be made, especially if he has some sort of higher purpose that he's trying to work towards. Whether the methods of how he goes about that are problematic or actually justified remains to be seen. But either way, I feel like that line could be referring to that going in either direction. So I'm right there with you. And I think that that ambiguity of what exactly he meant by that is part of what makes that character so fascinating to me already.
Exactly. I think Ivana Saknos, who plays Shin Hati, of course, her comments as well, dating back at Celebration and Sense in some of these other interviews, are very similar in that regard and pair very well to it. Of you can't judge the book by its cover, as we like to say, and there's motivations, there's reasonings behind how they behave, there's reasons why they're at where they're at. Of course, we see that throughout Star Wars. We see that with Anakin. We see that with a number of characters as well. So it's not necessarily something foreign or new, but I think within the context of this era, it is something a bit different and new from a Force user perspective, and about what is it that a Force user might be missing or what they need, especially with Balin being from the Jedi Order, whether he's disillusioned with that world, if he blames, whatever his motives are, but also a youngling at the time, or an infant possibly of Shin Hati, who's, still was very young in that era and doesn't necessarily have any direct connection to it, no direct correlation with it. How she factors into and how they kind of marry up their beliefs in order to push forward of what they actually want to do. Because presumably a lot of this conversation is probably happening between the two of them, which I'm just fast. I'm like so excited to see what that dynamic looks like, because it's been so long since we've seen really, Sith or dark Jedi or Sith and on screen, but then for them to have meaningful dialogue about kind of existential type of, belief systems and things, that we don't really get that very often. And so I'm really excited. Of course, we'll hopefully get that with the Acolyte, but this is a new perspective. I think that I hope they really dive into some of this within the context of the Ahsoka series. I think it could be really exciting.
I feel like that's just a concept that Star Wars seems to be leaning into right now in general, because I feel like I've seen that in the books lately as well. Just kind of like trying to dig deeper and get to the heart of some of these things, and kind of like almost interrogate these beliefs a little bit more, and kind of, I guess, debating about what actually is the best way. I mean, especially in Rise of the Red Blade, I feel like it deals with that a lot. So I like it. I'm glad that we're kind of going in that direction, because I think it's creating some really amazing stories to do that.
Bring back the Dark Jedi. That's all I'm going to say. I don't need Gray Jedi. I want Dark Jedi. Okay, so in another official Ahsoka teaser, we have Now or Never, which again is a lot of content that we've already had, some different camera angles on the similar scenes, maybe a couple of different action poses. Again, Baylan Skoll to me stole the show with this teaser. There are so few Jedi left, and then it seems like it's a different phrase, but she is coming. So presumably she is coming is probably talking about Ahsoka or one of the rebels or whatever they like to call themselves these days. I don't think they're quite the Resistance, but maybe could be talking about the Magistrate. Maybe. I don't know about that one. Morgan Elsbeth. I mean, maybe. We know that she's going to play a significant role in the series as the conduit to bring Thrawn back. She's the true believer, if you will, in that aspect of the cause. But a pretty good teaser, though. I mean, again, more is always great, especially these different contexts. I think we're seeing more clear connections between Baylan Skoll and some of the droids that are around him, maybe with the Inquisitor. I'm really curious how the Inquisitor fits in with all of this stuff, if it's someone that is working with Baylan and Shin. I think that would make sense, especially with some of the companions we see that seem to be similar in some of those scenes. So I'm hoping that there is a correlation there. But again, then we get other scenes where like the ship is firing on Ahsoka in the shipyard where the Inquisitor is at as well, and they don't seem to have any kind of regard for the Inquisitor there. So who knows exactly what's real and what's not real. But any takeaways from the Now or Never teaser for you?
Well, my main takeaway, honestly, I want to ask you something. Do you feel like we're getting more teasers than usual for this show?
Not yet. I don't think so.
Really? Okay. For some reason, to me, I was like surprised that we got another one. I don't know if time is just passing very quickly for me right now. Maybe that's what it is, but
I'm trying to think that with some of the other ones, I think we've had as many as 8 TV spots.
Okay.
For other previous series, and they were a little bit earlier on. So I'm curious, but again, most of them are just kind of reshot. Some of them are only 15 seconds or 30 seconds. So they're just kind of rehash or just reshuffling. but technically they've done like 8 of them or something like that. There's usually quite a few
Okay.
by the time we're done with
Wow.
all this. Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe it just, I don't know. Maybe they're coming out closer together now or something. I don't know. For some reason, I was like surprised that we got another one. But
These two did come out like back to back though, so I can see why you would feel that way.
yeah, that's probably what it was. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. I mean, going back to Balin Skull again. I mean, honestly, like as excited I am to see all of these characters that we all know and love so much, I am just so excited for Balin Skull. And every time I see Balin Skull in the trailer, that's what I gravitate towards. So, I mean, that's interesting. I wonder like how big of a role he's gonna have because he's really got my attention. But the line that there are so few Jedi left, it makes me wonder if how does he know this and which Jedi is he referring to? Like, has he met any of these people? Is he just assuming that there must have been a lot of Order 66 survivors? Is there something that he knows? So that would really had me thinking about what exactly does he do to know that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's a survivor of Order 66, so we know that much already. But yeah, how much does he know of Luke Skywalker? He's not been in the Order. He's been a bit out of touch. They sound like they've been mercenaries for quite some time now. So I'm with you. I think it is a great question of how well versed are people with their own kind, if you will, to paraphrase the Mandalorian or Din Djarin, with their own kind of Jedi. Like, how many are out there? Do they know how? We don't even really have a clear idea of how many are out there. What's their perspective on how many actually exist
Yeah.
besides Luke Skywalker, right? And I think Balin, I'm curious if he even knows about Ahsoka until they actually get confronted in the series, or maybe he's just become aware of her through some of the activities that have been going on in the galaxy. But after Anakin Skywalker's perishing and all of that stuff, maybe her name dropped off the radar to an extent. But I'm really curious to see and hear more of that, because I think that informs us a better idea about what the rest of the galaxy looks like too, and of how the rest of the galaxy views the Jedi. Really, because we really don't have a perspective of the Jedi for the most part outside of just a couple of characters. We really don't have any idea of what the galaxy thinks of the Jedi. I think for the most part, they probably view the Jedi, or they never came back for the most part.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like maybe it's been kept vague on purpose. So that
Right.
way, storytelling, future storytelling has a chance to kind of like play with that idea a little bit more without locking themselves in too much to what exactly it's going to look like. So I wonder if we'll actually get that question fully answered, or if we'll just kind of hear him reference a few people that he somehow knows about their whereabouts or something.
I'm all about name drops. I'm all right with that. Because I
Yeah.
get anything that connects him with, Order 66 and the Clone Wars era, and then ever since, right? It'd be a great thing just to get some. I mean, these are the Easter eggs, right? I think that would be great, of just little name drops that we would totally not expect that he may have come across or had seen, or maybe even confirmed some are no longer with us, but did survive the purge, so on and so forth. Would be interesting to have.
So are you saying that you're hoping for a Mace Windu name drop then?
Yeah, to confirm that he's dead.
No. No.
I'm
That's
not
not what
stepping
I
in.
meant.
That's exactly what you meant. I know what you did. Yeah, and shout out the chat to Gary, of course. He said, just from Mike, that Inquisitor will be Mara Jade. It tracks. I mean, the name of the character is Marok, Marrok. So
Yeah, let's
You
just
could-
make everybody mad. Mara Jade and Mace Windu in one episode.
oh my gosh, you talk about blowing the lid off the internet. That would set the world on fire. Okay, so in more Ahsoka news, of course, Entertainment Weekly has released in physical form their Ahsoka-centric issue, which is really exciting. And of course, they have an online preview as well called Ahsoka Steps Into the Light. It is a really long article. It has comments in there from Dave Filoni, Rosario Dawson, Natasha Liu Bordizzo, Ray Stevenson's in there, Ivana Sakno's in there, Mary Elizabeth Winstead. There's a whole lot of comments in there. It's a really good article. It's a cool story. One of the things I wanted to show up on the screen, though, is they've got this really wicked cool, like, animated cover that they put on. They had released it through Twitter. You can find it on their website. Again, we'll have the links for all these out in the show notes. But it has Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka, twirling both lightsabers. She ignites them and kind of bringing them over almost into a parallel, but they frame her face. It's really just kind of cool. With the words, Entertainment Weekly's up at the top of it. Of course, Ahsoka steps into the light, framing it along the bottom of the screen. But just a really cool video here. I wasn't expecting a video release of a cover. So I thought
The
that was really neat.
lightsabers look great.
They really do. And I mean, she
Yeah.
just looks so fluid. And I mean, Rosario Dawson has done such a great job physically learning the character of Ahsoka. And I think these are the this is a really tight and up close video in screen to where you have to get this right. I know it's a relatively short motion. You could practice and just, kind of learn it, but it has to be flawless when you do it, when you're really up this close. And going to be, you are the only centerpiece here. You're the only thing in the frame.
Well, and watching Mandalorian too, there were a lot of examples that I noticed of, you could tell that she's been studying the mannerisms and like the little hand gestures and stuff like that. So you can tell that she's really put in the time to try to get it right.
Absolutely. Yeah. She's definitely all in on this character, I think, which is, I think, a testament. Whenever she talks about it, she's already pining for a season 2, which means Ahsoka doesn't die. So we know that
Good
much.
to know. Yeah. Thank God.
Right. Yeah. Thank goodness. Right. So I think something else in the article that did come out to me, and I think we've talked about this before, but Carrie Beck had a comment and quoting Carrie Beck saying, but Dave was very thoughtful about crafting the narrative in a way that can invite people in. The show tells them everything they need to know along the way, end quote, which I think is really important to be able to do. We talked about this kind of at the top of the show. When you have so much content, when you have 10 plus years of a character of episodes, or really we've got 12 seasons of content, something like that, over 100, almost like 200 episodes with Ahsoka and something crazy like that with some of these characters in Rebels as well. That's a lot of ground to cover, and you can't do everything for everybody. So what are the things you have to really know, and how do you sprinkle that in the story? I think especially within, the history of Hera and Sabine, the history of Ahsoka and the other characters. What does Ahsoka mean to the other characters, especially from Rebels? And I think Sabine's she's going to be the linchpin. I think whether how well this all works and fits together, I think with Ahsoka in particular. But I was really, again, I focus on that because it's comforting to know that they really did want to be very deliberate with not excluding fans right away, but also not, for lack of a better word, just pissing off the hardcore fans that know all this stuff and feeling they have to force it down their throat and be so literal with it, that there's a balance. You can really do both. And you have someone like Dave Filoni who really does get that that's an important part of storytelling, to where, and there's a really broad middle ground of how you can do that effectively. And I really like that he is being very thoughtful with how to do that, given that we've got a bit of a time jump at the very end of Rebels in the first place, and being able to leverage that. And again, exploring this Gandalf the gray versus the white. And I'm still really seriously interested of how they work that end of Rebels and explain some of that in the Ahsoka series as well.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear that. I mean, I'm glad that they are going to be putting, kind of like telling people everything they know along the way, because not everybody's going to watch the cartoon. Like, some people just, which is a shame because Rebels is incredibly well done, but some people just do not have the desire to watch that.
Right.
And it would be a shame if all those people missed out on the show, because I'm sure that for people who don't want to watch the cartoon, but then watch Ahsoka and love Ahsoka, then they will be like, oh, now I get it. I want to go watch Rebels. So I think it's good that it's giving people a way to be let in without overwhelming people with like a bunch of info dump at the beginning, because that can sometimes backfire. So I think what this quote says about giving people the little information along the way, that sounds like the best way to tackle that.
I agree. You just can't jump into it and just say, here's all the things you need to go to get caught up, right? I mean, this is the, what you missed type of thing. Or in last week's episode, here's your quick recap. We don't really want that for as much content as there is, because it would serve a purpose. I say that we don't want it. We need it in some regard, but I'm with you. I like the idea of not doing it all at once. And we build it as we go. Obi-Wan Kenobi did a little bit of this too. They brought in some of those elements. Most people knew those characters somewhat well, but they were still able to do it and revisit it in very subtle ways throughout the series that I thought really helped it without getting bogged down in just rehashing everything that they had already been through, throughout the long history of Obi-Wan and Anakin / Vader.
I also liked how Obi-Wan did do a little bit of a recap at the beginning because I think it was important for us to like have that visual too, but they didn't overdo it. It was only a few minutes long and then everything else they sprinkled in. So I hope Ahsoka takes a similar approach.
And it was very cinematic too. I think that is really like the style you do it is always very important to where it doesn't feel like here's what you missed last week TV show.
Hmm.
It doesn't feel like that really quick hitter type of thing. It did actually feel cinematic. It did have it fit like the style of the show that we were going to watch, which I think was very important. So I that's a great point. I had to bring some comfort that all the people that involved with this are all talking with one another, you know, how they've approached things. And it all kind of, you know, we could all find something that works while still trying to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish. So
Yeah,
one other,
definitely.
yeah, one last piece of this is more the rumor / spoiler front. So if you're super sensitive to spoilers, I don't know that this is actually a spoiler, but I mean, there's a lot of things out there that says Anakin is going to be in the series. I think Hayden Christensen, this has been going on for 2 years now, I think, at least the last year. So I don't think any of that's a big secret. We don't quite know how he's in the series. There's a lot of rumors going around that there's maybe flashback scenes and that maybe we would see Ahsoka and Anakin fighting. And then there's little things lately that maybe Ewan McGregor might be reprising his role of Obi-Wan Kenobi in some way. That one I'm not going to maybe touch tonight until we get a little more on that one, because that one might be a little more spoilery in those kind of ways. But
Yeah.
I wanted to just explore, like, how would you feel about seeing a live action duel between Anakin Skywalker and Ahsoka? That's kind of question number one. And question number two might be, what is more interesting to you? An Anakin Ahsoka fight or Anakin and Ahsoka post his death in more of a Force spirit conversation of reconciling their past and their relationship? Like, which of those two might be more interesting to you?
Oh
But
my
and then how
God.
do you feel about them fighting?
Okay, well, I don't even know. That is so hard to choose. Anything that involves Anakin on screen in any way, I'm gonna be absolutely losing my mind. I'm gonna be crying. I'm gonna be freaking out. So
For those that don't know, when Lauren needs motivation, she will go put a picture of Hayden Christensen somewhere in the room so she can go look at it,
no, so
and that motivates her.
I was doing that because I was getting migraines from staring at the screen for too long. And so I had the picture
There are
of
worse people to look at, I guess.
yeah, it was reminding me look away from the screen, and that was like the thing that was like my incentive to look away from the screen. So,
Okay, sure.
just to set the record straight here.
Okay,
But
that's your
yes.
story now. That's fine. Yeah,
Okay, I was a 12-year-old girl when Revenge of the Sith came out. Like, come
right,
on. Like what does anybody expect?
right.
But okay, what was I even saying? I don't even remember now, but
I don't know. Mission accomplished.
um yeah, so Anakin coming back, I think okay, I would as much as I would love to see an actual lightsaber duel involving the two of them in a flashback, I think it would make more of a long-term impact emotionally to have an actual Force Ghost situation, Force Ghost conversation. So that's probably what I'm leaning more towards, but I'm just really excited in general about the idea of getting an Anakin flashback because Anakin is, I mean, Hayden Christensen love aside, Anakin is crucial to Ahsoka's story, and I feel like it's going to be hard to tell a story about Ahsoka without Anakin being involved in that in some way. So,
I agree with you. I think especially with her relationship with Sabine, I think leaning back and trying to repair or reconcile like everything that went on between her and Anakin, where they ended up and where they are now. I think the Force Ghost, Force Spirit, whatever you want to call it, I think it's so much more compelling. I think it's just more interesting than watching them fight and having some. We've kind of been there. We've already seen that. We've done it. I think not all audiences have, of course. So it might be useful to understand some of that. But I think what's far more interesting, I think, from a character development standpoint, where she's at now, understanding the trauma of her past, but also how to work through it to move to the future, makes so much more sense, especially with the context as it being to have Anakin in the here and now as a Force Ghost and being able to give that guidance that she wasn't able to get whenever the Did she actually leave the order? Was she back in the order when she was expelled? Did she actually leave? Did she actually? I don't think she actually rejoined. We say that she left the order, but I just don't think she ever rejoined. Anyway,
Yeah.
I get caught up on really silly things sometimes, but I like the idea of
technicalities.
right, yeah. But I love the idea of her and Anakin having a conversation. Those are the things I like. I like to see people find a way to reconcile those differences and finding a better path forward, and especially for those that have, for those we've lost, we don't always get that opportunity. And so for Ahsoka to have that healing and that closure, to be able to move on and to let go of some of her own personal guilt, I think with Anakin and maybe now with Sabine and those failures, very much like Luke experienced in the sequel trilogy, I think it would just be really interesting to see how the character Ahsoka handles all of that. What she does with it. What does she want to do differently from there? How does that make her a better, not Jedi, And does that bring her closer to being back to where she would consider herself a Jedi? For all the reasons we've talked about for numerous weeks in the past, right? So I love this idea. I really hope that Anakin comes back as a Force ghost. Even if we get flashbacks, I'd really want to see stuff in the here and now. I think it would just be so much more interesting.
Yeah, because she's been carrying the failure of that relationship with her all this time. And so I think for her to truly let it go, I mean, I don't think it's the only way for her to truly let it go, but I think one of the most powerful ways that we could see her let it go would be to actually like make it right with Anakin after, on the other side of everything that he went through in life.
Right. Exactly. Showing some comments up on the screen here. Gary says getting Anakin describing his own fall would be pure gold. Not going to argue with that. Steph says they offered it and she turned it down. I believe that's with the reference to Ahsoka going back to the order. Yeah, I think Yoda was saying, hey, you're back in. And Yoda's kind of way. And she's like, thanks, but no thanks.
Right. Yeah. And then that's when her and Anakin have that conversation outside right after that.
Right. I'm not sure what Stephanie's talking about here. She doesn't care about that. She wants Qui-Gon Force Ghost.
On one hell of a fanfic, I mention Qui-Gon Force Ghost all the time. I'm always wanting fanfics to have Qui-Gon Force Ghost show up.
I support this. I think this is all right. And then Jorge joining the chat. So I think we'll leave it at that. So again, a lot of stuff coming out from Ahsoka, and you could tell while the content we're getting is not necessarily really new, a lot of new scenes, new dialogue, it continues to really just bring thought-provoking conversation up and like things that we can continue to dwell on and look at new angles of it, which is what I like about the TV spots. I think they do present little micro stories that start to develop. Not all of them actually pan out, of course, but I really like that they try to shape that into these little, tiny 15-second, 30-second micro stories that can start to get you talking and get people excited to ask questions too, start that research, find the people that they know that know Star Wars, and they can come back and talk to them and say, hey, tell me about this or tell me about that, so that they start getting up to speed on everything. So again, we'll have all the links in the show notes on both the YouTube channel and on the podcast show notes as well. So Lauren, you have a final list of shout outs for us on the live stream?
Yes. So thank y'all for joining us tonight. In the chat, we had Steph, Alexandra, Sky, Music Train, Cube Dude, Jack, Alex, Gary, Kathy, Rob, Jeff, and Jorge. So thanks, y'all.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you coming out. If you're listening to this, again, thank you for the download. CantinaCast.com/YouTube if you'd like to show us. When you get out there, we would love if you subscribe to the channel. You'll get notifications if you hit the little bell. If you like what you're hearing or what you're seeing, please leave us a like. Leave us a comment, too. We've had some great comments out there. Appreciate y'all taking the time to do that. We do try to like and reply to each one as often as we can. So thank you so much for all of that. And again, Thursday, coming up, we're going to talk A World Between Worlds. So it's going to be super exciting. Albert should be back in the house as well. So if you've enjoyed Albert's break or if you've missed him terribly, well, he's back anyway.
Either way, he's coming back.
Either way, he's a-coming. That's right. All right, everyone. Appreciate it. Y'all take care. Be safe out there. We'll see you on Thursday.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.